February 23rd, 2024, Friday night at 11:30 p.m. The private jet waiting in the military section of Quito Airport was not visible on any flight plan. When President Daniel Noboa embarked on this secret journey, known only to the highest members of his security team, he did not yet know that 18 hours later, in the depths of the Kremlin, he would sign an agreement that would change the fate of world politics. This meeting would position small Ecuador unexpectedly among world powers and make Daniel Noboa Putin's most trusted Latin American leader. The planning of the journey dated back 2 weeks. The encrypted message that arrived at Carondelet Palace on February 9th came directly from the Kremlin. Russian President Vladimir Putin was inviting Noboa to Moscow for matters of critical bilateral importance. However, this invitation was not coming through normal diplomatic channels, but was being transmitted through the secret networks of the Russian intelligence service, SVR. Even the content of the message was extraordinary. Dear President Noboa, we wish to present you with an offer that could change the future of Latin America. This meeting will initiate a strategic partnership that will affect global balances beyond the traditional friendship between our two countries. These statements had been enough to capture Noboa's attention. However, what was truly surprising was the emphasis on secrecy at the end of the invitation letter. This meeting should not appear in any official records, should not be reflected in the media, and should only be known to your most trusted core team. Putin was clearly stating that this meeting was extremely sensitive. When Noboa decided to accept the invitation, the complexity of planning became apparent. Going to Moscow through normal protocols was impossible, because this would immediately attract the attention of international media and lead to speculation. Instead, a secret route needed to be drawn. Security Director Carlos Mendoza played a critical role in planning the operation. In official records, Noboa would appear unprogrammed for February 24th to 25th for private rest. In reality, the private jet departing from Quito would fly to Moscow via Istanbul. Even the details of the journey were like a movie script. The private jet was rented from a private company not belonging to Ecuadorian Airlines. The pilot and crew were experienced, security-cleared personnel for such secret operations. Even the aircraft's transponder codes had been changed, set to appear with a different identity in radar tracking. On the morning of February 24th, as the arrival time in Moscow approached, Noboa grasped for the first time the magnitude of where he was going. The Kremlin was not just a presidential palace, but appeared to be the center of 700 years of Russian power and the heart from which Putin governed the world. Even the reception ceremony at Vnukovo Airport was secret. There were no flags, honor guards, and media seen in normal state visits. There were only 3 black Mercedes, a silent reception team waiting for Noboa, and a closed route to the Kremlin. While passing through Moscow's streets, Noboa was impressed by the city's size and power. However, what was truly impressive was the historical weight he felt when passing through the Kremlin's gates. Within these walls, decisions that shaped world history for centuries had been made. After passing through Spasskaya Tower, Noboa was taken directly to Putin's private office. This office was in the most protected section of the Kremlin, a special hall where only the highest level state guests were received. On the walls of the hall hung paintings depicting critical moments in Russian history. At exactly 3:30 p.m., Vladimir Putin entered the hall. The warmth shown by the 71-year-old Russian leader when greeting Noboa seemed planned as well. Daniel Alexeyevich, welcome, said Putin, pronouncing Noboa's name in its Russian form. Even this small detail showed how carefully the meeting had been prepared. The first half hour passed with traditional diplomatic courtesy conversations. Putin spoke about Ecuador's natural beauties, the uniqueness of the Galapagos Islands. Noboa praised Russia's cultural richness and historical heritage. However, both knew what the real topic was. Daniel Alexeyevich, "You must be wondering why I sent you such a secret invitation," said Putin, sipping his tea. "Because the offer I will present to you will affect not only Ecuador, but the future of all of Latin America." According to the plan, Putin explained, Russia wanted to initiate a strategic expansion in Latin America. However, this expansion would not be in the form of military bases or direct intervention, but through economic and technological partnerships, and the center of this plan would be Ecuador. The strategic location of the Galapagos Islands is critical not only for nature conservation, but also for global communication networks, said Putin. "We propose establishing a joint space and communication technology center on these islands." This proposal has surprised Noboa because the Galapagos was on the UNESCO World Heritage List and any industrial activity was prohibited. However, the project Putin had in mind was a revolutionary approach that combined environmental protection with technological development. "This center will apparently be a scientific research base," Putin continued. "However, in reality, it will function as the center of Russia's satellite communication network in the Pacific region. We will pay Ecuador $500 million annually in rent. $500 million constituted a significant portion of Ecuador's annual budget. However, Noboa also saw the geopolitical calculations behind the offer. Russia wanted to have a strong footprint in Latin America, considered America's backyard. "Of course, this is just the beginning," said Putin, smiling. "We propose a $3 billion investment package for developing Ecuador's oil resources, new refinery construction, and most importantly, sharing Russia's most advanced defense technologies." The defense technologies part was particularly noteworthy. Putin was offering Ecuador S-400 air defense systems, Sukhoi fighter jets, and submarine technology. This could make small Ecuador a regional military power. However, the most striking offer was Putin's special gift. "Daniel Alexeyevich, I want to make a personal offer to you as well. Honorary doctorate from Moscow State University, Russian Friendship Order, and a special apartment in the Kremlin. You and your family can stay as guests in Russia whenever you wish." These personal gestures showed how much Putin valued Noboa. The offer of a special apartment in the Kremlin was a privilege offered only to very select friends. During the meeting, Putin also touched on America's Latin American policies. "Washington still sees your region as its own backyard. Russia, however, accepts Latin American countries as equal partners," he said. These words were among the issues Noboa had been thinking about. Relations with America were important, but one-sided dependence could also create problems. Partnership with Russia could offer Ecuador a more balanced foreign policy opportunity. "Of course, this partnership will remain secret," Putin added. "Official agreements will be signed through normal diplomatic channels. However, real cooperation will be conducted through special channels." This emphasis on secrecy showed the sensitivity of the agreement. To avoid America's reaction, cooperation would be conducted gradually and carefully. In the second half of the meeting, Putin went into even more detail. "We can also help with Ecuador's debts to China. As Russia, we can mediate for restructuring these debts. If necessary, we can even take over a portion of them." Chinese debts were one of Ecuador's biggest economic problems. Putin's offer to help in this matter could truly be a solution. Additionally, we can ensure that Ecuador's agricultural products are sold in the Russian market with special quotas. Bananas, cocoa, coffee. The Russian people will love Ecuadorian products, said Putin. The agriculture topic was vital for Ecuador's economy. Entry into the Russian market could create new income sources for millions of farmers. During the meeting, Putin also showed special interest in Noboa'S family. "If your wife, Lavinia, also comes to Russia, we can prepare a special cultural program for her. We can give her a private tour of the Hermitage Museum." These personal touches showed Putin's diplomatic mastery. He was creating long-term friendship by establishing not only official agreements, but also personal bonds. Towards the end of the meeting, Putin asked an unexpected question. "Daniel Alexeyevich, how often do you meet with the American president?" This question showed that Putin wanted to learn about the state of relations with America. Noboa gave a diplomatic answer. "We meet when necessary, but Ecuador prioritizes its own interests." This answer seemed to please Putin. Throughout the meeting, Putin's respect for Noboa was noteworthy. Despite the age difference, he treated the young leader as an equal, listening to his ideas seriously. This also showed that Putin saw great potential in Noboa. At 6:30 p.m., the 3-hour meeting ended. Putin, shaking hands with Noboa in farewell, said, "This is just the beginning, Daniel Alexeyevich. Together, we will accomplish great things." After the meeting, Noboa attended a special dinner invitation. In one of the Kremlin's most exclusive halls, he tried Russian dishes with a small circle. At this dinner, he was introduced to Russian oligarchs and high-level bureaucrats. On the morning of February 25th, before the return journey, Putin gave Noboa a special gift, a handmade Fabergé egg from the 18th century. "Let this be a symbol of our friendship," said Putin. When leaving Moscow, Noboa was both excited and anxious, because the decisions he had made could completely change Ecuador's future. Partnership with Russia offered great opportunities, but also carried great risks. During the return journey to Quito, Noboa was collecting his thoughts. Putin's offers seemed very attractive, but they needed careful evaluation. America's reaction, regional balances, and Ecuador's long-term interests had to be calculated. At the beginning of March, the first results of the agreement made with Putin began to be seen. Russian technicians obtained work permits in Galapagos for scientific research purposes. This activity, officially recorded as an environmental protection project, was actually laying the foundations of communication infrastructure. In April, the scientific cooperation agreement between Ecuador and Russia was signed. This agreement was introduced to the public as a normal academic cooperation. However, in reality, it formed the legal basis for the technology transfer proposed by Putin. In May, Russian investors began coming to Ecuador. New partnerships were established in the oil sector. These partnerships appeared to be normal commercial agreements, but Putin's grand plan lay behind them. In June, Noboa's second Moscow visit took place. This time, the visit was not secret, but the agenda was much more comprehensive than official statements. Putin and Noboa finalized the details of strategic partnership. In this second meeting, Putin presented yet another surprising offer. "Daniel Alexeyevich, we invite Ecuador to become an observer member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization." This offer was a historic step that would integrate Ecuador into the Asia-Pacific region. In July, the economic results of the agreement began to be seen. Ecuador's exports to Russia increased by 300%. Russian tourists began discovering Galapagos. Trade volume between the two countries reached record levels. In August, Putin kept his word, and a portion of Ecuador's Chinese debts was taken over by Russia. This significantly lightened Ecuador's financial burden and expanded its economic maneuvering space. In September, the Noboa family privately visited Moscow. Lavinia Noboa toured the Hermitage Museum with a special tour. The children watched ballet at the Bolshoi Theater. This family visit strengthened the friendship between the two leaders. In October, the Scientific Center in Galapagos became operational. This center, officially conducting marine life research, had also become a critical part of Russia's communication network in the Pacific region. In November, Putin and Noboa met at the G20 summit, this time in the public eye, but they still had private moments. Putin introduced Noboa to other world leaders as Latin America's most visionary leader. In December, the year's final surprise came. Putin invited Noboa as Russia's official guest for 2025. This invitation was now an official state visit, no longer secret. Entering 2025, the results of the Noboa-Putin partnership were clearly visible. Ecuador had become Russia's strongest ally in Latin America. Its economy had strengthened, technological infrastructure had developed, and international position had increased. Behind this success lay that secret Kremlin meeting. The trust and respect Putin showed to Noboa had created a unique friendship between the two countries. Now Noboa was Putin's most trusted leader in Latin America. In January 2025, during Noboa's official visit to Moscow, Putin had prepared a big surprise for him. A special exhibition symbolizing Ecuador-Russia friendship had been opened in the Kremlin's private museum. This exhibition featured works showing the historical ties between the two countries. At the opening of the exhibition, Putin said, "Daniel Alexeyevich, the friendship we have established with you is building bridges not only between two countries, but between two continents." These words showed how deep the partnership had become. In February, an unexpected development occurred. The U.S. State Department expressed its discomfort with the Ecuador-Russia rapprochement through diplomatic notes. However, Noboa felt the support he received from Putin against these pressures. Putin immediately reacted to this situation. In his special message sent from Moscow to Quito, he said, "We stand by our friends. We will not allow any external pressure to affect our friendship." In March, Russia's investments in Ecuador reached $5 billion. This had become the largest foreign investment package in the country's history. Putin was keeping his word and truly transforming Ecuador's economy. In April, a surprising offer came to Noboa from the Kremlin. Putin proposed to educate Noboa'S son at Moscow State University with a special scholarship. "We must raise future generation leaders together," Putin had written. This offer showed how strong the personal bond Putin had established with the Noboa family was. He was building not only interstate, but also interfamily friendship. In May, the Russia Cultural Center opened in Ecuador. This center became a platform where Russian language was taught, cultural events were organized, and friendship between the two peoples was strengthened. Putin's video message at the opening ceremony deeply affected the Ecuadorian people. "Dear Ecuadorian friends, the friendship between us transcends geographies," Putin had said. In June, the Russian Science Center in Galapagos began attracting worldwide attention. The international scientific community appreciated the environmental protection research conducted here. Of course, they didn't know the real purposes. In July, the friendship between Putin and Noboa gained a new dimension. Regular video conference meetings between the two leaders began. At least once a week, they discussed the world agenda and cooperation projects. In these meetings, Putin gave Noboa advice not only as a Kremlin leader, but as an experienced big brother. "You have achieved great success at a young age, but your path is longer," he would say. In August, the construction of Noboa's special apartment in Moscow was completed. This apartment, Putin's gift, was in a prestigious area close to the Kremlin. The Noboa family could now come and stay in Moscow whenever they wanted. In September, Putin's trust in Noboa reached a new level. He decided to share some of Russia's secret military technologies with Ecuador. These technologies were making Ecuador a regional power. In October, a joint project of Putin and Noboa came to life. The Russian-Ecuadorian Youth Exchange Program was launched. Every year, hundreds of young people would receive education in both countries reciprocally. This program showed Putin's visionary approach. He was thinking not only about today, but also about future generations, laying the foundations for long-term friendship. In November, a special invitation came from Putin to Noboa. He wanted him to spend New Year's in the Kremlin. "Let friendship grow even stronger with the new year," he had written. This invitation was the pinnacle of the privilege Putin showed to Noboa. Celebrating New Year's in the Kremlin was a privilege that only the most special friends could experience. In December, the year's final surprise came. Putin awarded Noboa the highest degree of the Russian Friendship Order. This order was given to very few leaders whom Putin personally appreciated. Entering 2026, the Noboa-Putin friendship had now reached legendary proportions. The trust and respect between the two leaders was being exemplified not only between two countries, but also in global politics. Putin referred to Noboa as Latin America's smartest leader in international meetings. Noboa described Putin as a great statesman and my personal friend. The fruits of this friendship could also be seen by the Ecuadorian people. The economy was growing, technology was developing, international prestige was increasing. The partnership established with Putin had truly transformed the country. In January 2026, the practical results of the partnership began to be seen more clearly. Ecuador's oil production increased by 25% thanks to Russian technology. This increase provided an additional income of $800 million annually to the country's budget. In February, Russian experts began an agricultural modernization project in Ecuador. This project, which combined traditional farming methods with modern technologies, aimed to significantly increase farmer incomes. In March, an educational cooperation protocol was signed between the two countries. With this protocol, Ecuadorian students could receive discounted education at Russian universities, and Russian teachers could work in Ecuador. In April, communication between Putin and Noboa had become routine. They held regular meetings every Thursday morning at 10 a.m. These meetings included not only official topics, but sometimes personal topics as well. In May, the first Russian language course opened in Ecuador. The course, which started with 50 students initially, quickly reached 500 students. Ecuadorian youth showed great interest in Russian culture. In June, Russian companies began creating employment in Ecuador. First in the oil sector, then thousands of Ecuadorians were employed in construction and technology fields. In July, the advice Putin gave to Noboa began to yield results. Ecuador's effectiveness in regional diplomacy increased. Relations with neighboring countries strengthened. In August, the Science Center in Galapagos produced its first results. Research in marine life conservation provided truly valuable scientific data. Both the environment was being protected and technological infrastructure was developing. In September, Noboa's recognition in the international arena increased. With Putin's support, he began participating in BRICS meetings as an observer. This created opportunities for Ecuador to open up to new markets. In October, the first trade ship voyage between the two countries took place. The ship coming from St. Petersburg to Guayaquil carried Russian machinery, while tropical fruits were sent from Ecuador to Russia. In November, the Ecuador-Russia Joint Economic Commission was established. This commission would coordinate commercial cooperation between the two countries and develop new projects. In December, a meaningful gift came from Putin to Noboa, a special world globe model produced by the Russian Space Agency. It had the flags of both countries and the inscription, "Friendship knows no borders." Entering 2027, the stability of the partnership was noteworthy. The cooperation that had been going on for 2 years continued without any serious problems. This was the result of both leaders' pragmatic approach. In January 2027, Noboa's personal relationships with his Russian colleagues expanded. He was in regular communication not only with Putin, but also with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov and Defense Minister Shoigu. In February, the first electric buses produced with Russian technology in Ecuador began service. Environmentally friendly transportation options were being increased in Quito's streets. In March, following Putin's advice, Noboa strengthened his regional leadership role. By mediating between Latin American countries, he increased his diplomatic prestige. In April, Russian investors began renewable energy projects in Ecuador. The construction of wind and solar energy plants was increasing the country's energy independence. In May, scientific cooperation between the two countries produced concrete results. Russian scientists and Ecuadorian researchers developed joint projects. Studies on Amazon biological diversity were particularly valuable. In June, the crisis management techniques Noboa learned from Putin proved useful. During a natural disaster in the country, damages were minimized thanks to rapid and effective intervention. In July, the cultural dimension of the partnership expanded. Russian classical music concerts began to be organized in Ecuador. Russian artists met with the Ecuadorian people. In August, the Next Generation Diplomacy Project, a common vision of Putin and Noboa, came to life. Joint training programs began at the diplomatic academies of both countries. Today, that secret journey that began on the night of February 23rd is considered one of the turning points in Ecuador's history. Daniel Noboa's bold decision made his small country one of the important actors in world politics. This story went down in history as the most beautiful example of how diplomatic courage and strategic vision can create miracles, and how relationships established with the right partners at the right time can transform a country.